This is the first time vampires have shown up on the countdown, but it won't be the last. This is M.L. Miller Fright's Best in Horror Countdown 2022 through 2023. Counting down the best in horror within the window of October 1st, 2022 through September 30th, 2023.
Number 23.
RENFIELD was released on April 14th, 2023. It's streaming on Peacock Plus from Universal Pictures. It's directed by McKay and written by Ridley, Robert Kirkman, and Ava Tramer. One of my absolute favorite characters in horror fiction is RENFIELD. He's one of those enigmatic characters whose story we know up to a point as the insane servant to Count Dracula, but apart from a few books and comics featuring the origin and continuing story of the character, he's ripe to be explored. So when I heard there was going to be a big-budget horror comedy focusing on RENFIELD, I got pretty excited. Then I heard Nick Cage was going to be playing Dracula, and I got super excited. In RENFIELD, Nicholas Hoult plays the titular character and servant to the all-powerful vampire Dracula, played gleefully by Nicolas Cage. RENFIELD has been Dracula's servant for over 100 years, providing victims for his master, getting rid of their bodies, and moving the king of vampires from one location to another when the blood runs dry or some Van Helsing shows up with a pointy stake. But RENFIELD has grown weary of his job. His life is nothing save for working for his master, and he yearns for something more. RENFIELD tries to only snatch the scum of the earth for Dracula to devour, and takes some comfort in sharing the problems with the rest of the people in his weekly self-help group. But when Dracula gets a new idea to not just survive, but take over the world, RENFIELD decides he's had enough and attempts to cut ties with his master. But he soon finds out that it's not so easy to quit being Dracula's most famous servant. As one might glean from that lengthy description, a lot of backstory and character work is given in RENFIELD before the real story even begins. RENFIELD's responsibilities, his plight, his conflict, his powers, all of that takes a lot of time to get into, and much screen time is dedicated to really flesh out that character. More so than one would really expect in a movie like this, which I guess is understandable because it's an adaptation of a decently known literary character. There's a focus here to really establish RENFIELD's origin and motivation, very reminiscent of how comic book characters are established, and it doesn't surprise me since The Walking Dead creator Robert Kirkman was one of the producers and main writers. It helps that Nicholas Hoult is playing the bug-eating servant. At first, the dapper gent doesn't seem the type to play such a pitiful character, but Hoult has shown in a variety of roles that he can do just about anything, making the tall, confident actor believable as the pathetic servant of Dracula. But let's not overlook the real reason why people would want to go see this movie. Dracula is a role a character-driven actor like Nicolas Cage was born to play. A diehard film geek himself, Cage gives his all and then some in this role, with shades of Bela Lugosi, Max Schreck, Gary Oldman, and even George Hamilton mixed in with Cage's own prior performance as a vamp in Vampire's Kiss. Every time Cage is on the screen, there is no one else to watch. Even when covered in decayed makeup, Cage takes his role to the extreme, making this his own, in one of the more iconic performances of Dracula in recent memory, while still paying homage to past Dracula greats. From the moment I heard about Nick Cage being in this film, to every second I experienced him on the screen, this performance simply made me laugh gleefully every time. And RENFIELD is quite funny. All involved, from the leads to the lesser performances, are well written and performed. Parks and Recreation's Ben Schwartz is great as a privileged wannabe gangster, and Awkwafina, who can be grating at times, has a rather nuanced character with an arc all her own. Surprisingly, the only thing RENFIELD is missing is a romantic lead for Hoult, though at times you think Awkwafina's character might qualify, but nothing really ever comes of it. I guess that's a sign of the times where finding love does not always equal the happy ending that everyone is looking for. I kind of miss the old days when it was. While the story is strong, I feel they tried to cram quite a bit into one movie, and that might be why there's a lack of a love interest, making the runtime a bit overlong. Still, that means more time with these great characters, and while the gore is over the top and very CG, these scenes are fun to see Renfield and Dracula cut loose with reckless abandon against the bad guys, who really are only slightly badder than Renfield and Dracula. All in all, this is a wing-dang-doodle of a good time. The runtime of Renfield is a bit cumbersome, but I can understand why the filmmakers had such a hard time trimming it, as most likely that would mean fewer scenes between Renfield and Dracula, and most of them are too gold to cut. Still, Renfield is thoroughly great mainstream horror that pushes boundaries with its gore and violence, but never forgets to tickle them bones. Though not as over the top as Renfield, I found this Chilean vampire flick a sublimely funny little vampire flick. El Conde was released on September 15th, 2023. It's streaming on Netflix. It's directed by Pablo Larraín and written by Guillermo Calderón and Pablo Larraín. An aged vampire known as El Conde, played by Jaime Vadel, decides he is ready to die after 200 years of drinking blood and leading armies into war. As his human family gathers around him in his final days, they are eager to receive a wealthy inheritance and possibly earn El Conde's bite to turn them into vampires before his passing. But a young bright-eyed nun named Carmencita, played by Paula Luschsinger, arrives in the mansion with an agenda of her own, sparking new life into the elderly vampire, and El Conde now thinks he might not be as ready to die as he thought he was. Irreverent, strange, and often downright kooky, El Conde feels like a Chilean version of the Royal Tenenbaums with vampires. The matter-of-factly way Jaime Vadel, as El Conde, goes about his life and speaks about his own death is absolutely amusing. He's a tired old vampire. He's too old for this shit. And those around him are just waiting for him to die. It's a wonderfully humorous take on malaise, someone down on the dumps and completely giving up the ghost. That is, until the lovely Carmencita, Paula Luschsinger, enters the scene. And I can understand why El Conde is so smitten. Hubba hubba. The French actress is charming and extremely easy on the eyes, offering up something fresh and new in the vampire's life. But seeing El Conde bumble his way around, smitten with this woman who is a fraction of his age, is downright hilarious at times. First and foremost, El Conde is a wonderfully clever and funny film. Its humor is subversive, more amusing than laugh-out-loud funny, and there are moments of sheer hilarity. Like Wes Anderson's films, which often focus on the upper crust and their disconnect from their own feelings, El Conde offers up a take on sheer snobbery and backstabbiness that made me chuckle over and over again. But El Conde is not all for laughs. I wouldn't say it's a scary film, but it does go quite over the top with the gore when things get real and dangerous. So many beheadings. So many beheadings go on in this movie. And while everyone is amusing in turning the tables and betraying one another, the stakes are very life and death here, as well as pointy, making you actually care about these offbeat characters. This movie never forgets that it has a vampire as the central character, and though it is amusing seeing El Conde attempt to keep his balance while he takes flight into the night to feed, there's always a dark tone to it all. Again, like Wes Anderson, director Pablo Larraín offers up some absorbing framework. So much meticulous work seems to have been put into these elaborate scenes. Everything is decadent and detailed, especially the absorbing rooms of El Conde's mansion. There are scenes from throughout history that feel genuine and well-researched. This is simply a rich-looking movie that excels at showing how the upper class live and what they take for granted. In the end, El Conde is a satirical cautionary tale of getting everything you want and still not being happy. It depicts the pursuit of happiness and how hard it is when one comes to the realization that nothing will ever be enough. El Conde can take whatever he wants, but the one thing he strives for, happiness. I'm sure there are some political themes going on, but me not knowing about Chilean history, most of it probably went over my head. Though I did catch the elitist attitude as El Conde categorizes European blood as the tastiest, while South American the least. Nevertheless, my lack of knowledge of world history didn't make me enjoy El Conde any less. While I think the ending of El Conde comes around in a rather out-of-the-blue fashion, the road there is decadent, sinful, and undeniably fun to watch. As always, feel free to agree, disagree, or how about you play along at home and give me your own picks for your favorite horror movies. It's October, so let's talk horror. Come back tomorrow for the next level in the Best in Horror Countdown. Be sure to hit all of those pertinent bells and whistles down below, and you'll never miss a post. Happy Halloween, folks.